April 24, 2018. Police cars surround a quiet home in California. Inside lives a retired grandfather, a neighbor, a normal man. But detectives are about to reveal something that will shock the entire country. For more than 40 years, a shadow moved through California neighborhoods, leaving fear behind and disappearing without a trace. He was called many names: the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, but the world would come to know him as the Golden State Killer. And the way they finally caught him, it changed criminal investigations forever. The man watering his lawn did not look like a monster. It was April 24, 2018. The sun was setting over a quiet neighborhood in Citrus Heights, California. Birds chirped, sprinklers clicked, children rode bikes at the end of the street. Then 3 police cars rolled in without sirens. Officers stepped out slowly. They walked toward a beige house with trimmed hedges and a simple driveway. Inside that house lived a 72-year-old former police officer named Joseph James DeAngelo. For decades, detectives had chased a ghost across California, and now they were standing at his door. One officer knocked. Another waited near the side gate. The man inside did not know that his DNA had just betrayed him. He opened the door, and in that moment, one of the longest cold case investigations in American history finally caught up. But how did they find him? How did a man who vanished in the 1980s hide in plain sight for over 40 years? To understand that knock on the door, we have to go back to the beginning. In the 1970s, California was growing fast. New neighborhoods stretched across Sacramento, Contra Costa County, Orange County. Families felt safe in quiet suburbs. Doors were locked, but fear was rare. Then strange crimes began to happen. At first, police thought they were separate cases. Burglaries, break-ins, homes entered late at night while families were asleep. Drawers opened, personal items moved, but nothing stolen. The intruder would slip in and disappear before sunrise. Victims said they felt watched. Police called him the East Area Rapist. He attacked at night, wearing a mask. He tied victims up. He whispered threats in a calm voice. He seemed to know police patrol routes. He knew how to avoid detection. He would vanish before officers arrived. Fear spread across Sacramento County. People bought locks. Dogs bark more often. Helicopters searched the dark. Still, he escaped. The attacks continued. Then something changed. In 1979 and early 1980, similar crimes appeared hundreds of miles away in Southern California. This time, the violence escalated. Married couples were attacked in their homes, husbands tied up, wives assaulted. In several cases, victims were murdered. The suspect left almost no evidence. He entered through sliding glass doors. He used ligatures. He often placed dishes on the backs of victims, a trick to hear if they moved. He controlled the scene with cold patience. And then he disappeared again. For years, police departments in different counties worked their own cases. Sacramento detectives chased the East Area Rapist. Southern California investigators hunted what they called the original Night Stalker. No one realized they were chasing the same man. Not yet. The 1980s passed. The attacks stopped. No new crimes with the same pattern. The suspect had vanished. Cold case boxes filled with reports and photos were placed in storage. Families waited for answers that never came. Then, in the 1990s, forensic science began to change everything. DNA testing became stronger. Evidence once thought useless could now speak. Investigators retested preserved samples from crime scenes. The results were clear. The same DNA appeared across counties: Sacramento, Contra Costa, Orange County, Ventura County. The East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker were the same person. The media gave him a new name: the Golden State Killer, a single suspect responsible for dozens of assaults and at least 13 known murders. California realized it had faced one of its most dangerous serial criminals, and he was still free. But who was he? Police had a DNA profile. They had patterns. They had maps of attack locations. They believed he might have been military or law enforcement. He knew how to move silently. He understood procedure. He made taunting phone calls to victims and police. but his identity remained hidden. Years passed again. Detectives retired. New investigators took over. The case never closed. It waited. Then came the breakthrough no one saw coming. In 2017, a small team of investigators decided to try something different. They turned to genealogy, not criminal databases, public genealogy websites where ordinary people uploaded their DNA to find family history. The idea was simple. If the killer's DNA was not in police records, maybe a relative's DNA was in a genealogy database. They uploaded the crime scene DNA profile under a false name. Weeks passed. Then a match appeared. Not the killer, but a distant cousin. Fourth cousin level. It was enough. Genealogists began building a massive family tree. Hundreds of names. Branches spreading across generations. Old birth records. Marriage certificates. Obituaries. They worked backward and forward at the same time. The suspect had to be male. He had to be the right age. He had to have lived in California during the 1970s. Slowly, the list narrowed. From thousands, to hundreds, to dozens. One name kept appearing near crime locations. Joseph James DeAngelo, born in 1945, former police officer, lived in Sacramento during the East Area rapist crimes, later moved south during the time of the murders, then returned north. The timeline fit, but they needed proof. They needed his DNA. In April 2018, detectives began watching him. He lived quietly in Citrus Heights. He rode a motorcycle. He mowed his lawn. Neighbors described him as grumpy but ordinary. He had daughters, grandchildren. For decades, he had blended into suburban life. Detectives waited for a chance. They did not knock right away. They needed a sample. One evening, investigators collected a discarded item from his trash, something he had thrown away. It was tested. The DNA matched. Not just a partial match. A direct match to the Golden State Killer profile. After more than 40 years, the ghost had a name. And that brings us back to that sunset. Police cars without sirens. Officers approaching the beige house. A quiet knock on the door. When they arrested Joseph James DeAngelo, he reportedly asked a simple question. Is this about the murders? The words stunned investigators. How could a man who had lived undetected for decades slip so easily into normal life? How did no one see? Or did someone suspect and stay silent? As news spread, California held its breath. The Golden State Killer was finally in custody. But arrest was only the beginning. Because behind that quiet front yard, behind that calm suburban street, lay decades of secrets. And the evidence inside his home was about to reveal something investigators had feared all along. When detectives entered the house, they moved slowly. Every room felt ordinary. Family photos on the wall, a recliner near the television, dishes in the sink. Nothing about the home screamed serial criminal, but cold case investigators knew something important. Monsters do not always live in dark castles. Sometimes they live in quiet neighborhoods. After the arrest, forensic teams sealed the property. They collected computers, old papers, tools, boxes stored in the garage. They photographed everything. Because after 40 years, even small details mattered. But the real evidence was not in the furniture. It was in the DNA. The discarded item taken from his trash had already matched the crime scene samples. Now, they needed confirmation through a direct court-approved swab. When the official test came back, it confirmed what investigators already believed. Joseph James DeAngelo was the Golden State Killer. The DNA was not close. It was exact. For the first time, science had done what patrol cars and stakeouts could not. It had found a ghost. News exploded across California, then across the country. For decades, survivors had waited for answers. Some had rebuilt their lives. Some still carried fear from nights that never fully ended. When they heard the name Joseph James DeAngelo, many felt a mix of relief and disbelief. He had been a police officer. He had once worn a badge. That detail shook the public. How could someone sworn to protect become the person communities feared most? Investigators began building the case carefully. Even though they had DNA, prosecutors wanted more. They reopened old files. They studied old maps. They compared attack patterns again. The Golden State Killer had followed a pattern. He attacked in middle-class neighborhoods. He struck at night. He used ligatures brought from outside the home. He often scouted areas before attacking. He parked blocks away. He escaped on foot or bicycle. He changed counties when pressure grew. The crimes were organized, planned, calculated, and then, in 1986, they stopped. Why? That question remained. Detectives looked into DeAngelo's background. Born in 1945, military service in Vietnam, became a police officer in Exeter, California, later worked in Auburn. He was fired in 1979 for shoplifting a small item from a store. That detail surprised many. A man who committed complex crimes brought down by something so simple. After losing his job, he moved. The timeline matched the shift in crime locations, north to south, then silence. Was it coincidence? Or did something in his life make him stop? Marriage? Children? Fear of getting caught? No one knew for sure. The use of genealogy databases became one of the most talked about parts of the case. Investigators had used a public website where users uploaded their DNA to trace family roots. They built a family tree that stretched back generations. Great-great-grandparents, distant cousins, branches of names connected through history. From one distant DNA match, they mapped an entire bloodline. Experts called it a breakthrough. Some called it controversial, but it worked, and it opened the door for solving other cold cases across the country. After the Golden State Killer arrest, dozens of unsolved cases were reopened using similar methods. The cold case investigation world had changed forever. DNA was no longer just a fingerprint, it was a family map. As prosecutors prepared charges, they faced another challenge. The crimes were old. Some counties had different statutes of limitations for certain offenses, but murder charges do not expire, and there were many. In 2018, DeAngelo was charged with multiple counts of murder across several California counties. Courtrooms filled with reporters. Survivors sat quietly in rows. The man who had once terrorized neighborhoods now sat in a wheelchair behind glass. Gray hair, blank expression, no mask, no shadows, just an aging man. The contrast felt unreal. For decades, he had been a faceless predator in the dark. Now, he was visible, human, and silent. In 2020, something unexpected happened. Rather than face a long public trial, DeAngelo agreed to a plea deal. In exchange, he would avoid the death penalty. Instead, he would receive multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The courtroom grew quiet as he stood and spoke. His voice was calm, flat. I admit, those words echoed through families who had waited over 40 years. Some survivors gave impact statements. They spoke about fear that followed them for decades, about sleeping with lights on, about never feeling fully safe again, about children who grew up hearing stories of a masked man. The judge sentenced him to multiple life terms. He would die in prison. No release, no freedom. The Golden State Killer case was officially closed, but questions remained. How did he avoid capture for so long? Was he always confident? Or did he live in fear of the knock at the door? Did he watch the news when detectives announced DNA breakthroughs? Did he suspect that technology would one day catch him? Investigators believe he stopped committing crimes in 1986. But why? Age? Family responsibilities? Close calls? Some experts suggest serial criminals sometimes stop when life circumstances change. Others believe he feared DNA advancements. The truth lives only in his mind, and he has said very little. The Golden State Killer case became a symbol of something larger. It proved that cold cases are not always cold forever. Evidence stored in boxes can still speak decades later. A single strand of DNA can cross time, and public genealogy databases, once used for finding distant cousins, can solve serial crime investigations. But the case also sparked debate. Privacy advocates questioned how genetic data was used. Law enforcement agencies began creating rules and guidelines. Technology moved faster than the law. Still, for survivors, one thing mattered most: a name, an answer, accountability. In prison, DeAngelo now lives a quiet life. Multiple life sentences mean he will never walk free. The man who once controlled victims now follows strict prison rules. Count, meals, lights out, a life measured by routine. The same system he once avoided has closed around him. But even after the sentencing, detectives continued reviewing old files. They wondered, were there more crimes? Were there unsolved cases that matched his pattern but lacked DNA evidence? The Golden State Killer case may have reached a legal ending, but investigators are careful. Patterns can hide, and sometimes, even after arrest, the full story is not finished. Because when detectives searched deeper into archived evidence boxes, they found something unexpected. A report from a small county not originally linked to the case. A case with similar timing, similar method, but no DNA sample on file. And as they began to re-examine that forgotten file, one chilling possibility emerged. What if the Golden State Killer's full story has not yet been told? The old file was covered in dust. It came from a small county that had never been fully connected to the Golden State Killer investigation. The year matched. The method looked similar. A quiet neighborhood. A late-night break-in, a masked man who moved with strange calm. But at the time, there had been no DNA technology advanced enough to preserve strong evidence. The case had faded into the background. Now, in a new world shaped by science, investigators reopened it. Forensic teams searched storage rooms for anything that could still hold genetic material. Old clothing, bedding, swabs collected decades ago. Back in the 1970s, detectives had no idea how powerful DNA would become. Some evidence had been stored carefully, some had not. This time, scientists used modern tools far more sensitive than anything available back then. Even tiny traces could now speak. Weeks passed. The lab worked in silence. When the results came back, they were clear. The DNA did not match Joseph James DeAngelo. The Golden State Killer had not committed this crime. Relief and frustration filled the room at the same time. Relief that they were not uncovering more victims tied to him. Frustration that another case still had no name attached. But something important had happened. The system had learned. Investigators were no longer guessing. They were testing. Science had become the strongest voice in the room. The Golden State Killer case did more than close one investigation. It changed how cold case investigations are handled across America. Police departments began reviewing unsolved serial crimes with fresh eyes. Old rape kits were tested. Archived samples were re-examined. Genealogy became a new tool, carefully regulated, carefully debated, but powerful. Other long unsolved cases were solved using the same method. Names that once seemed lost forever were finally identified. Families who had waited decades received answers. For many, the Golden State Killer arrest proved something important. Time does not erase evidence. It only waits for technology to catch up. Back in California, courtrooms slowly emptied. Media trucks left. The headlines faded. But survivors continued living with memories that no sentence could erase. Some said seeing DeAngelo in court brought closure. Others said it only reopened wounds. He sat silently during most proceedings. No long explanations. No dramatic confession. Just short answers. Guilty. Admit. Yes. His calm voice felt strange after decades of fear. People had imagined a monster. Instead, they saw an aging man in a wheelchair. But the damage of his crimes had never aged. It had lived on in families, in sleepless nights, in neighborhoods that changed how they locked their doors. In prison, Joseph James DeAngelo now serves multiple life sentences. No parole, no release. His days are controlled by the correctional system. He once outsmarted. Morning count, meals, limited movement. Routine? The same routine followed by thousands of other inmates. The man who once studied police patrol routes now lives under constant supervision. The life sentence is quiet, but permanent. Detectives who worked the case often reflect on one moment. The decision to try genealogy. It was a risk. It required careful legal review. It required experts who could build family trees from distant cousins. Without that choice, the case might still be unsolved. One small DNA match, a fourth cousin, opened a door that had been closed for 40 years. From one branch on a family tree, investigators narrowed down to a single man. It sounds simple now, but it was not. It took patience, maps covered in red dots, boxes of evidence, late nights in labs, and a belief that science would eventually win. The Golden State Killer case became a symbol of modern forensic power, but it also raised hard questions. How should genealogy data be used? Where is the line between privacy and justice? Lawmakers and experts continue to debate those questions today, because once technology proves it can solve decades-old crimes, it will be used again. In the end, the man who had once moved silently through dark homes was caught by something invisible. Not a witness, not a fingerprint on a window, but a string of genetic code passed down through generations. A silent signal in a database. A family connection that pointed investigators in the right direction. For decades, he had hidden in plain sight, mowing lawns, raising children, living an ordinary life. But science does not forget, and neither do cold case detectives. The Golden State Killer case officially closed in court, but its impact continues. Police academies teach it as a lesson in persistence. Forensic labs cite it as a breakthrough in DNA technology. Cold case units use it as proof that patience matters. Because somewhere right now, in a storage room filled with boxes, another unsolved case is waiting. Another DNA sample is preserved. Another family is hoping for a knock at the door. Not in fear, but with answers. And thanks to one decades-long manhunt in California, investigators know something they did not know before. Even after 40 years, the past can still be caught. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe for more crime documentary.